Board members, next we're moving to our general consent calendar. And are there any, and this is a time for board members to remove any items from the consent to be discussed later. Board member Jenny Earl, and then if you could be specific to what the item is. And
Yes, if you could pull 3.4. There's just a few questions.
this is 3.4.
Yes, please.
Okay, I'm not seeing any others. I'm board member Laura Belknap.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the consent calendar.
We have a motion to approve the consent calendar. Second, board member Janet Cannon. Any discussion to that motion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those
Aye.
Okay, is that Elisa or Linda?
No, it's Linda.
Okay. Okay. Welcome.
Thanks.
Those opposed, well, the voting was unanimous. So next, we'll go to board member Jenny Earl on 3.4. Did you have clarifying questions or?
Yeah, I just have some questions, and maybe someone from that committee could answer those.
Okay.
So on lines, I'm on draft 4.
We'll invite Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones. Do you have? Oh, this isn't yours, though.
No, it's not.
It isn't. Okay. It came out of finance, but who should we invite? Superintendent? Well, let's ask you a question. Why don't you ask
Okay,
the
I have
question?
two
We'll see if
questions.
the
Two
superintendent-
questions. I'm trying to understand the change in the funding from previous years. If someone could just maybe spell that out a little clearer. And then the second one is, so on lines 128 through 130, I'm just trying to understand, let's see, dividing the number of students in the LEA. Why we picked 2 on the AP exam instead of 3. I mean, why that criteria in measurement? And I just don't. Okay. You have to have a 3 for college to get credit if you ever get them. Do you want further explanation on that, or is that enough to go with? Okay.
So my name's Nathan Ock. I'm the Early College and STEM Education Specialist here at USB. And I'd be happy to answer that question.
Okay, so it's based on the total number of students receiving 2 or higher, and yet, on the exam, and yet no colleges in the state of Utah it has to be 3 or higher to receive credit. So I'm just trying to understand why we're going to 2 instead of 3.
Yeah, absolutely. So the process surrounding this board rule update was with regards to increasing underrepresented student populations in both gifted and talented AP and IB coursework. And the College Board, who oversees the AP test, defines 1.8 as college ready. And so a student that gets a 2 on that test has demonstrated that they're ready for college coursework. And so the committee determined that would be an appropriate measure to fund schools based on, and would alter this kind of inequitable process that in the past has led LEAs to vet what students are going to be in courses based on whether or not they would be able to get a 3.
Do you have a
So if I'm
follow-up?
understanding that it's college ready, not whether or not they receive credit. That's what we're basing our criteria on. Is that correct? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? You had a couple.
And the
That
other
was
one,
one.
I just was trying to understand fully what the differences in the change of the finances are for it. In other words, the funding mechanism, the specific changes. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Board member Laura Belknap, you're chairing the committee.
I guess I'm trying to understand fully how it's going to impact my
Okay.
my constituents before I vote. So I guess that's what I'm saying.
Well, Jane, I
understanding.
think that Nathan could probably go more into that, but for clarity, it used to be only funds would come for students who passed the test, okay? And so those who districts were a little more, I shouldn't
Choosy?
say that. I think a lot of students didn't take the course, and then the pendulum swung the other direction, that only though, as kids enrolled, then the districts were funded for it. And I didn't think that was too equitable either, to go from either you pass and where the funding went, and that's why it came to finance. But this seemed to be a happy medium to allow all kids to be able to take the course, and then also funding to go on both sides of that pendulum is what
Okay,
the
thank you.
deal
That
was.
does clarify that further, so.
Okay. Board Member Scott Hansen?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions along the same lines. When I looked at the recommendations from the committees, I saw 3 different lines that, I'm sorry, we got some feedback this morning, that had to do with funding. One of them, under Pillar 3, said evaluate the current allocation of resources for early college coursework, and I think we've done that. And it also states the USB rule will amend current funding procedures to encourage LEAs to increase their student enrollment in courses to be representative of their student population, as well as an increase in the number of students completing courses at a certain threshold, and to incentivize LEAs to encourage first-generation students to enroll and succeed. And then as you go down further under funding recommendations, there's a line that says LEAs will be provided compensation for each first-time enrollee in an AP, CE, or IB course. I understand some of what's going on with the addition of, the number of kids that pass tests, even if that pass the test at a certain level, even if it isn't passing or to receive college credit. But how did we address the first-time enrollees in AP and then CE and IB courses, which I don't see mentioned here? And how about the representative student population piece? Is there a way that those are handled here?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer. So it's notable, first, that concurrent enrollment isn't involved in this board rule. The ASP board rule is only referencing gifted and talented funds, AP funds, and IB funds.
Okay.
If you look at the projections document that says AP and IB projections, at the far right, the last tab is IB funding. And so the funding for IB, in similar fashion to the way that AP funding was first shifted, is now based on enrollment entirely. So any student that enrolls in an IB course would achieve funding for that LEA. And so AP coursework, with the movement away from only funding based on the test scores, sorry? Oh. Moving away from only funding based on test scores to involving part of the funding for students enrolling in those courses, in the committee's view, was getting at that idea to provide compensation. There is no additional compensation for a first-time enrollee, but all students that are enrolled would gain funding for their LEA. Does that answer your question?
I think so. So the incentive is just to increase the numbers, and that would include some first-time enrollees, and we're going to pull them in. How about the piece about representative of the student population? I see some lines that say the LEA will provide assurances, 195 and 196, but isn't there some hard data we can get?
Yeah, so
would show that?
at the beginning of the board rule, and I'll have to look at it to tell you what lines, we have asked LEAs to determine what underrepresented, how they would define underrepresented students for their student population, with the approval of the superintendent. And then those definitions for what underrepresented students mean for the LEA would then go into their goals for how they're increasing that representation. And so in addition to the assurances, they're also asked to provide hard data for the state disaggregated student groups, as well as report to their school board on their progress in this process of increasing representation.
Can you tell me where it talks about the hard data
Yeah.
and which lines those are? Because I must have missed that. I just saw the assurances and.
So the underrepresented student starts, the definition that Nathan just gave starts on line 55.
Got that.
Okay, so then, go ahead.
But then the piece that says that data will be submitted that shows how many, or how they've increased the percentage of underrepresented students.
That is numbers on 112.
So the school board idea that I mentioned is 175 and 176. And then, starting on 177, it says, "The report shall include the following performance criteria related to the identified students whose academic achievement is accelerated, which shall be disaggregated by groups as defined in the state accountability system."
Okay. And then how does that translate into a reward for increasing their numbers?
The funding allocation, the way that the committee looked at it was that the funding allocation would, the more enrollments they had, the more money effectively that they
Okay,
would
so
get. And so there
indirectly-
is no
Yeah.
assessment that would shift the award.
Okay. So that sounds like it was well considered. I appreciate your explanation. Thank you.
Yeah.
Vice Chair Brittany Cummins?
When the committee, I know we probably need to put a motion from the committee to continue
That's what I'm-
discussing, and so I don't know if it would be the committee chair, but I do have a question in
That's what
regard
I'm
to
gonna
the
try to go
motion.
next, but I
Okay.
wanted to let you finish first. So,
Okay.
but maybe I could go back. Let's get a motion on the table so we can discuss it. So I'll reach to the, I'll reach out to the, I, and I might be able to help with that, right here. You have it?
Is it the first one?
It's R277-707 draft 4. Board Member Belknap, this is coming from the committee. This was a motion from the committee.
Okay, so the committee action was the committee voted unanimously to approve R 277-707 draft 4 on first reading and to hold draft 3. The motion for the board, the committee moves that the board approved R 277-707 draft 4 on second and final reading.
Okay. This has come from committee. It doesn't require a second, so we'll have discussion to the motion. Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
So my question, I am not in favor of the amendments in this, and so my question is if we want the draft that's currently out there to move forward, they're connected in this motion, and so how would we just have to split the motion?
Not in the motion, it's not.
It's not in the motion? So it's been held, and so I don't know if this probably is going to pass, but if it doesn't pass, would the draft that's already out there, would it automatically just continue, or would it require a motion to continue?
Motion to continue.
Okay. Okay, gotcha. So can I make my comment? That was my question. So I'd just like to
Yes, yep.
speak. Okay, sorry. I want to speak against the amendments in this particular rule thing. Huh? Yeah, the amendments that change change it back from where it was to change it to 50-50. I support the other rule that was on the table and that's currently up for going into motion. And the reason why, what was that? No, the draft that was out. So it's draft 3, the original one that was out for to go into place. The reason why it was the way it was, and we were talking about funding based on enrollment, was to increase equity of access so that LEAs would be incentivized to enroll students in AP courses and allow all students to have access to AP courses. And so at all schools, all LEAs will have access to that funding as they increase access to their AP courses. It doesn't matter that it changes based on students who are passing with a certain grade. Some students don't choose to take the AP class, or excuse me, the AP test at the end of the course. And so that was one of the reasons why we talked about participation and not just passing the test at a certain grade, so that students have access to that enriched course, but they may not choose to take the test. They shouldn't feel pressured into taking that test if they don't feel like that's something that they want to do. And so I am not in support of these amendments and will not be voting for this to move forward.
Mark, could I be added to the queue, please?
Yes, we'll recognize you.
Are you ready for me now? Sorry.
I didn't get that.
Tell her to speak.
Okay, we need you to speak up.
Sorry, this is Linda. Can you hear me now?
Barely.
Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I would agree with Brittany. We have been working on this for a couple of years, trying to get more equity in these AP courses. And I think that the draft that without the amendments does that much better than the one that we're talking about right now. So I am also opposed to these amendments. Thank you.
Board Member Belknap?
I've thought about this for a long time, and having the pendulum swing totally the opposite direction is very disconcerting to me. That we've been funding by 3 or better by kids taking this test for years, and then the pendulum swung that everyone who is in, they just can go enroll anybody they want, and that's where all the funding lands. I really like this middle ground where we want to get more kids in. The ability to have them in gives partial of the funding, and the other part is that they get funding for a 2 or better, knowing that a 2 is their college ready, even though they don't get college credit. I think it gives a better balance instead of throwing the baby out with the bathwater here.
Okay. Board Member Michelle Bolter?
Thank you. I want to agree. I concur with what Board Member Belknap said. A lot of the discussion, we didn't want to set up students for failure and just like, okay, if you want to take this course, go ahead. I mean, even college, in order to enroll in college and be college ready, you have to pass a college entrance exam. And we lowered it to at least a 2. That way they can feel confident in their skills and, okay, I scored well, I can do this. It was a 1.8, I think, or what was the score? What was the score to say that they were ready to take this course?
Officially, it's 1.8.
Okay. So, I mean, I feel like we don't want to set up the students for failure and them take this course without at least seeing that they could do it. So I feel like it does provide this perfect balance, like what Board Member Belknap, that it's not now being swung so far to the other way, that they're just going to enroll students just for the funding. And so I feel like this strikes that good balance.
Board Member Lear?
I'd just like to ask Nathan what, as an expert in this and someone who studied it and looked at the information, the data, I'd like to ask him why he, and I'm assuming you prefer draft 4, why you like draft 4 over draft 3, and I'm assuming you also consulted with others who work with you, and why do you prefer draft 4 and those provisions more than draft 3?
Nathan, would you like to respond?
Yeah. So
I'm
I would, speaking for the stakeholders that we spoke to, there was some split between their preferences for effectively what was in draft 3 and what was in draft 4. There's a couple of pieces of information that might be useful. The first of which is that the College Board is shifting their AP fee schedule to be due in the fall next year. And the reason that's germane for this rule is because now school districts and charters will have to determine who's taking AP tests before the course is close to completion. And so that provides an incentive for those students to stay the course effectively, to stay in the course throughout the entire time, and could alter, like that provides an incentive outside of what the funding would, regardless of which way it shifted. When we spoke to the Access Committee and other LEAs, I think that the general sentiment was that going with draft 3, the 100% enrollment funding mechanism, would be the most effective way to shift practice. And in the long term, if we saw LEAs that were putting students in courses inappropriately, there would be the opportunity to shift to something along the lines of draft 4 later on. With that said, there was a number of representatives from our committee and from LEAs that mentioned draft 4 is the most balanced version in the long term.
I thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair,
Okay.
for letting Mr. Alex
All right.
speak.
Board Member Jennifer Gravitt.
I feel really ambivalent about this one, so I appreciate the discussion. I appreciate input from you because I think for me, like Chair Cummins said, that I would like to increase access for students, for all students, and I do see a lot of students who take the course with no intention of taking the test, and they really benefit. They're more ready for college, and so I have real mixed feelings to have it tied to the test. So I appreciate the discussion. That really helped me understand some things. So thank you.
Board Member Jenny Earl.
Thank you. My question is how do we know the impact on districts? Is there a significant difference in, has there been projections that the change of this rule, how do they impact the different districts?
Yeah, so one of the documents included in the board docs
Okay,
is,
so that is
this
the
projection.
projected impact by draft 4?
Yeah, and so you can tell the difference between the drafts because the farthest left tab is 100% enrollment, and effectively that would show what draft 3 provided. And so the furthest left column with numbers is the most recent allocation, and then the furthest right 2 columns are the difference in total funding from a monetary standpoint and the percentage difference. And then there's another tab that says 50-50, and that demonstrates the projections for draft 4 with the same columns applying.
Okay.
Okay. Board Member Lisa Cummins.
What was the reason the College Board gave to have funding for the testing be given at the beginning of the year instead of the end? Did they provide that?
So I think their primary objective in shifting that fee schedule, at least the one that they stated, was to increase retention of students that started taking a course, getting through to the end of the course and feeling having some skin in the game, so to speak, with reference to maintaining their enrollment in that course.
So right now, the College Board is under investigation for money being funneled offshores. And then they redirect it back for bonuses. And it's been a concern of mine that we're funding taxpayer money for AP and SAT testing and things like that to the College Board, and that they're now asking for.
Is this germane to the
Yes,
motion then?
yes,
Okay,
because
I'm trying
then
to find it. So.
Because then it doesn't. I don't see that it gives skin in the game, other than there's money up front for the College Board and taxpayer money going there. So that's a huge concern of mine. I mean, my child didn't decide he wanted to take the AP exam until at the end of the course when they said, oh, you have an 8 on the score, right? And so how does a student determine that they're going to succeed in the class if they haven't even taken the class yet, and then having to pay for money up front? I think that's wrong, so I'm not going to vote for that.
Okay. Board Member Cindy Davis.
Do we have a spreadsheet that shows us the difference in allocation for draft 3 and the difference for draft 4, or only the difference in allocation for draft 4?
So
Am I just looking at it wrong?
draft 3 is the 100% enrollment tab on the furthest left tab. And so what that provides.
That would be draft 3?
Mm-hmm. And then the 50-50 enrollment is what is what's currently in draft 4.
And what's status quo?
You're talking the farthest right and left and right.
The furthest right, I think, is the IB tab.
100% does not show up.
And is one of these columns status quo?
Okay, Scott.
All right. So, yes.
Is this the one that's in board doc?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so because there's this dialogue going on and because the public has an interest in this, that's why I'm displaying it, okay? So if you'll you can either use what's in board docs or let me orient you to the screen, okay? Okay. So what Nathan is saying is he's saying that draft 3, right, is just tab labeled AP-100% enroll. Okay, right, Nathan? Okay. Which is your question, Board Member Davis, right, through the chair. That's your question. So what he was alluding to earlier is you can see the difference in the allocation methods in column I under draft 3. Okay? So I'm just going to stay on this tab just for a little bit longer so all board members and the public are oriented towards what the method is of what was presented to Finance Committee last month for decision-making purposes. So this is draft 3 tab. And, you know, then what you could do, and if you want, I can move this tab over next to AP 100% enroll. This tab is AP-50% enroll, 50% test passed, which is what is under draft 4. Correct, Nathan? That's right. Okay. So, you know, as staff, we could, you know, I could make this a little bit more user-friendly and move that tab next to 100% enroll. Because, you know, we're trying to demonstrate to you what the difference is between 3 and 4, you know, in the allocation methods and what occurs under each one for your consideration.
As far as the data is based on, is this just last year's money spread according to the
Okay,
data?
Board Member Scott Nielsen. No, is your mic, I got your mic on now.
Okay, go ahead.
Can you just tell us how this was created, what data was used? That's fine.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
wrong
the furthest left column, if you scroll to the top of the document, is advanced placement dollars for FY 2018, and so that is the actual allocation from this most recent allocation, which was allocated in the fall. All of the projections are based on the previous year's data. And so obviously those numbers are going to change when we get the numbers for enrollments and tests for this school year now.
And that money then was based on an allocation, based on subcount only?
we can't hear you unless you turn your... You got to be recognized so we can get your question. Board Member Scott Hanson.
Thank you. So that data, where we see the actual dollars awarded, that was based on what criteria?
So that was based on the previous board rule, which was all incidences of a student getting a test of 3 or higher.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Board Member Scott Nielsen.
Yes, I move the previous question.
Okay, we have a motion to end debate. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. So we're going to vote. All in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Voting was unanimous. We end debate here. So we're going to vote on the motion. And the motion is to approve R277-707 draft 4. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Will the ayes
No.
raise their hands? Board Member Cindy Davis, Board Member Janet Cannon, Board Member Gravitt, Board Member Belknap, Board Member Lear, Board Member Scott Nielsen, Board Member Huntsman. How many is that?
And then was it Linda? Was she?
She's an A.
She's an A.
We get the hands up again, I'll just count it. I think that's 1, 2, 3, 7. Okay. The others were in A. Okay, motion fails. Takes eight to move it forward. Yep. What's that?
Money right up front. So it drops.
Yeah. Okay. Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
I'd like to move that we continue the draft 3 that is currently in front of the Rules Committee. That we not hold it, or whatever that process is that we.
We have to approve R277, 707 draft 3. That would be.
Okay, I don't think we do, because we approved it at a previous board meeting. It was already out there, and it was always, the finance committee just voted to hold.
Okay, I'm going to ask Deputy Superintendent Stallings to
Yes, thank
comment.
you. Vice Chair Cummins is correct. Draft 3 of R277, 707, passed, was approved by the board, and then we filed it with the Office of Administrative Rules. It was open for public comment. It's ready to be made effective, but we held on making it effective because of a request of having it come back to Finance Committee. So I think what Board Member Cummins' motion would be is to direct staff to go ahead and have R277, 707 Draft 3 be made effective.
Okay, let me see if this is your motion, Vice Chair Brittany Cummins. So your motion is to have R277-707 draft 3
Be made effective.
be made effective. Do we have a second? Is there a second on draft 3? Okay, we'll have Board Member Linda Hanson. There's others that wanted on that. Discussion to that motion. Board Member Bolter. Did you-
No, I'm just.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Board Member Scott Hanson.
Yeah, I'm not sure the correct motion to make, and I don't know that I can. I'm speaking to the current motion, but I think this needs more consideration by the board. This seems like a little bit of a
You can
convoluted process. Can I table this motion and
motion. You can put it on the table, that can come back, or you can postpone, and then it would
well,
go back to
motion,
committee.
a motion to postpone and send it back to committee so that we could have more discussion on this?
Okay. Well, is that a motion to? Well, or you can make a.
Yeah, the intent, what I'd like to do is be able to have more discussion on this. I know that we cut the discussion on, I thought that was premature, but that motion passed. I feel like now we're with draft 3, and I'm not sure we all understand what that means.
Yeah. So the question. Yeah. So the motion is to have it become effective. That's what we're speaking to, and you're wanting not to make it effective.
I guess it could go one more month. It could go one more month, but they're setting that.
That's what would happen.
Pullback.
Okay. So you're speaking against the motion. Okay, Board Member Cindy Davis.
Do I have to speak to the motion, or can I ask a question at this point?
You can ask a question.
Okay, just quickly, how is draft 3 different from status quo and draft 4? Or maybe I should say, am I understanding this right? Draft 4 was more like a split, partial test score and partial participation, and draft 3 is more, the funding's more toward full participation and no test score? Or do I have that backwards?
Yeah.
Yes. Will you speak to that, Nathan?
Yeah. So I'll try to be more clear about each of the 3 circumstances. So previously, up to this point, the way that money for the ASP board rule in its entirety has gone out, or at least for AP and IB, has been for AP. It's always been based on all the students that get a test score of 3 or higher, and then you effectively take all the students in the state and divide it up by ratios. So each LEA has a percentage of those students, and then the total allocation is given to them based on that percentage. The 100% enrollment, which is draft 3, that would go from test scores being the basis for all the money that goes to each LEA to enrollments. So now LEAs wouldn't be getting money based on the test scores of their students. It would be based on the students that are enrolling in AP courses. And then the fourth, the draft 4, is effectively a mixture of both of the previous two that I just explained, but instead of an AP test score of 3 in order to get that money, it's an AP test score of 2. So 50% of the allocation for AP funds would go for all the students that got an AP test score of 2 or higher, and 50% of the funds would go to based on the enrollment of students in AP classes. Did that help? Okay. It's confusing.
Board Member Belknap?
And just to speak to the motion again, is that the draft 3 deals with enrollment. So it has nothing to do with anything else. If you enroll a student, districts get the money. It's not about completion. It's not about staying in the course. Yeah, but I can't speak to 4 because we're only speaking to 3.
Okay. The motion, okay, I'm going to take this to the vote. There's any other, I guess I'm not. Board Member Michelle Bolter.
I just feel like I need to say, since I was on the prevailing side, my plan is that if we vote this down, I will bring back draft 4 to revote again and pass.
Okay.
So I just wanted to put that out there. So if we vote this down, then the prevailing side can bring back draft 4.
That is correct.
Mark,
Okay.
can I make a comment?
Yes. Do you have a question or?
It's a comment
Okay.
on the motion.
Okay.
So the reason why I'm in favor of this is, as Nathan gave the comments, he noted that Access felt like this was the way to go, and that we could come back if we try this and we see that districts were not being responsible in the way that they were enrolling students. We could always come back and change it. And I think that we ought to give it a try. I think that it would help with equity with our students. And then if we see that there's a problem, Nathan can always bring it back to us. Staff can always come back and say, we think we need to make changes. But I think we have our Access Committee to help us with equity issues. They felt comfortable with this, and so I am in favor of this as well.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions or comments to the motion, so we're going to vote on it. The motion before the board is that R277-707 draft 3 be
Made effective.
to go into effect. Now, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? No.
Aye.
Well, the ayes, who was the aye on the phone? Was there an aye on the phone? Is that Linda?
No.
Okay.
Yes, the aye on the phone was me. Sorry. I am in favor of draft 3, yeah.
Okay. So that's
Becoming
one.
effective, yes.
The ayes? That was Alice.
That was Hanson.
What?
Ask if Alice was to make sure if Elisa was,
Elisa, you were an aye for R277-707 draft 3 to go in effect now. Were you an aye? Need a. Well, I'm still going to count in the interest of time. Who were the ayes? We had Vice Chair Brittany Cummins, Linda Hansen, Board Member Newell, and then there might be one on the phone, but I can't get it. Oh, grab it. There's a fourth, and maybe one on the phone. So it takes 8. We don't have the 8, but we can't get clarity on the one on the phone. So the motion fails. Board Member Bolter.
Thank you. I would like to bring back and revote on draft 4. that was brought forward for the finance committee.
You were on the prevailing side,
I
as
was
I
on the
recall,
prevailing
so you
side,
can
yes.
make a motion
Right,
because
so
you're
I
on there.
move that we revote on draft 4. Reconsider.
Reconsider the action on R
Draft.
R277-707 draft 4?
Yes.
Okay. I will restate that the motion on the floor is R277-707 draft 4, and it's coming back because you're on the prevailing.
Just a motion to reconsider.
Oh, you have a motion to reconsider, sorry. R277-707 draft 4. We have a second. Did I hear a second? Okay, discussion. Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No.
Okay, well, the ayes, raise your hand, I'll call you out. Board Member Davis, Board Member Cindy Davis, Board Member Cannon, Board Member Lear, Board Member Scott Hansen, Board Member Belknap, Board Member Michelle Bolter, Board Member Jenny Earl, Board Member Scott Nielsen, Board Member Huntsman. Do you have the nays? We're assuming we got them.
Just to reconsider, so now we vote on the motion.
Okay, now we come back to the motion. So the motion is to approve R277-707 draft 4. All those in, seeing no, do we need a second?
No.
Not because that went through. Any discussion to that motion? Are you discussion? Scott, you are?
So I'm
Board
looking
Member
at
Scott Hansen.
looking at the data on the 50% tab. Some of these schools go from a 0 to funding there. I don't understand how the data works. I'm looking at, for example, City Academy. No funding at all, and then that goes, oh, sorry, that's not a good example. There's some other ones that go from 0 to funding under the new rule. Let me pull one. Spectrum Academy, 3D.
Nathan, can you answer that
Yeah,
question?
Can you just help me understand how the data's working there?
Yeah, sure. So if a school under the previous funding mechanism had no AP test scores of a 3 or greater, then they wouldn't receive any portion of the funding. And so under that this 50-50 allocation, there could have been circumstances in which students got a 2. And in addition to that, they also could have had students that were enrolled in AP courses. Those are the 2 variables that determine funding under this new funding mechanism. And so there could be circumstances in which a school didn't, or an LEA, got no AP test scores of a 3 or greater previously, but did have some students in AP classes, and also could have students that got an AP score of 2 or greater.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Board Member Cindy Davis?
So if this doesn't pass, then we stay status quo, which is all the funding goes for test scores. Is that correct? Since draft 3 didn't pass to be effective? To not be effective?
She said if it doesn't.
Okay. We'll have
So if we don't
I'm just saying
pass
what
any-
happens if.
Deputy
draft 4
Superintendent Stallings.
Yes. If nothing passes today, the current rule that is in effect with the distribution formula that's been in effect for a number of years will continue. And Deputy Superintendent Jones and I were talking about, practically speaking, if the board doesn't distribute or change the distribution formula by next month, it likely won't be able to impact or be in effect for the next school year. So if you were to take it back to committee and then take another month, it will likely then wait until the 2020-21 school year. So because right now LEAs are budgeting and they need to know what the distribution will be, time is of the essence to let them know what their likely distribution formula will be either this month or next month.
Even though the funding is distributed.
Yeah, even though the funding is distributed in the fall, they budget, for their courses and the instructors that support these programs right now, or in the spring.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions, so we're going to vote on this. The motion that's on the floor is to approve R277-707 Draft 4. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? No. Okay, with the ayes, raise your hand, be recognized. Board Member Cindy Davis, Board Member Cannon, Board Member Gravitt, Board Member Lear, Board Member Scott Hansen, Board Member Belknap, Board Member Bolter, Board Member Earl, Board Member Scott Nielsen, Board Member Huntsman. Those online, are you nays or ayes?
No, I'm a aye.
You're an aye?
Linda,
Okay,
yes.
all right. Not hearing any other, so did you get that one? Okay, so we can fill in. Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Okay, that concludes our consent items.